Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and man, I really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to watch the video and spend some time with me today. I always appreciate that. And guys, today we're going to be talking about the size and the weight of a jig, specifically just the weight of the jig, how much a jig weighs, and really give you guys some tips and advice on how to select the correct weight based upon what type of cover you're fishing, the mood and the personality of the fish, and just some general tips to get you guys some more bites, because the weight of a jig and how fast or how slow a jig falls, it has a lot to do with actually triggering a strike from the bass. So we'll get into that in today's video. Also, guys, just a quick invitation out there. I'd like to invite everybody, if you haven't had a chance to hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling, I'd like to invite you to do so. It's free and easy. If you hit that subscribe and the notification button, you never miss a video. And I looked the other day, and right now, guys, only 37% of the people that watch the Intuitive Angling videos are actually subscribed. You got over 60% of the people that watch the videos are not subscribed. So good way to support the channel by hitting that subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Okay, guys, the weight of a jig. I don't know how much how much thought you put into this, but this has a lot to do with several different factors. It has a lot to do with actually triggering the strike from a bass, and it has a lot to do with the efficiency in terms of covering water if you need to fish fast or slow. And there's a lot to really digest here, so we'll get into that a little bit. Now, first of all, one of the things that will determine how fast or how slow a jig falls, in addition to actually how heavy the head is the trailer that you have on it, the size of line, and the water temperature. All those factors have a factor in it. So obviously, different type of trailers are going to slow the fall down. If you use a curly leg trailer, there's more drag to it, so it'll slow the fall down. If you use a chunk style like I prefer here, it's a little bit faster. And also the larger diameter line that you use will slow the bait as well. And also, guys, I will put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description for my new Blaukat throwback jig. You can get it at Tackle Warehouse. They sold out the first day they came out on the market last week, but they're coming back in, and you can go ahead and order them. And I think the next shipment date is like September 2nd. So I'll put my jig link in the description of this video if you guys want to try some of these. So anyway, considering that's also a determination as far as the size of head that you want to use. Now, here is my general thought for sizes of jigs. Most of the time, you're going to use either 3/8 or a half ounce, or a 5/8 size jig, based upon a lot of different factors. For most anglers, I think the most popular size of a jig is a 3/8 ounce jig, because a 3/8 ounce jig, it's pretty user friendly, because you can fish it pretty good, you can skip it good, it has a nice decent fall to it. I think that a lot of people that's their go-to size is a 3/8 ounce, and it's a good jig, don't get me wrong. It's really good jig if you're fishing around what I call clean targets. It's not a real good size if you have to penetrate heavier cover, like if you have to penetrate a thick brush pile, or penetrate flooded cover, or penetrate some cattails, or any type of matted vegetation. But a 3/8 ounce jig, guys, if you're fishing like around boat docks, that's probably my favorite size, a 3/8 ounce. Pitching it around like a stump, really good size. Pitching it around a log, maybe on a rocky bank, any type of cover that you don't actually need to penetrate over something. And also a 3/8 ounce jig is a really good size to cast, like if you're casting out off points, or maybe working a jig down a bluff bank, really good size. Also, it's good in cold water. Bass like a little bit slower fall in cold water. 3/8 ounce is a good size with that. I do use a 1/4 ounce sometime, and actually we're probably gonna offer a 1/4 ounce in my Blaukat throwback jig at one point, but a 1/4 ounce jig is a specialty jig for certain situations, not used near as commonly as a 3/8 or a half or a 5/8. So when you're moving up a little bit, when you're moving up to the half ounce size, one of the things, that advantage about going to a half ounce size, is the jig is a little bit heavier, it falls a little bit faster, so you can do a little bit more with it in terms of penetrating a little bit thicker cover. So the times that I go to a half ounce jig, which is probably 50% of the time, if you talk about jigs from a 1/4 ounce up to 5/8, I probably use a half ounce jig 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time is mixed between like a 3/8, 5/8, and sometimes a 1/4. But a 1/2 ounce jig is probably my favorite because it's a really versatile bait. It falls fast enough to cover a lot of water, and I can do both with it. I can still pitch and flip around docks and stumps, but 1/2 ounce jig allows me also to penetrate some of the a little bit thinner, heavier cover. What I'm talking about, thinner, heavier cover, let's say I'm fishing a flooded willow tree where I have to flip over a limb. You know, that 1/2 ounce jig is going to get down to the bottom a lot quicker than the 3/8. It makes me more efficient. If I'm flipping into a lay down tree that's a little bit more complex and has a lot of different limbs on it, that would be a good choice. Or let's say I'm flipping into lily pads that have maybe little bitty openings like that, or maybe hydrilla or milfoil that's not matted, but it has little openings in it. 1/2 ounce jig falls really good through that type of cover. And then, like I said, you can adjust the exact rate of fall from a 1/2 ounce jig based upon the trailer if you fish. If you fish something like a rage craw or a zoom speed craw behind a jig, it's going to slow it probably 25% down over using like this big salty chunk by Zoom, which is my favorite trailer for it. So that's a consideration too. And finally, guys, the 5/8 ounce size, which is the heaviest size we make in the Cumberland Lure Blaukat throwback jig. This is sort of my heavy cover jig. This is something that I'll use for fishing thicker flooded vegetation, like thicker buck brushes, really thick, gnarly laydown trees that have a bunch of limbs. Maybe some places like if you guys fish up at Lay Lake or some of the Alabama river lakes where you have current, sometimes you need a heavier jig to get that bait down in current quicker. Or, you know, maybe some of the locust bushes, mesquite bushes. Sometimes if you guys fish down at Sam Rayburn, you can also penetrate thicker grass. So if you've got matted grass, like you guys that flip and pitch some of the matted grass along the river edges at Lake Gunnersville, a 5/8 ounce jig will get down through that mat a little bit more efficiently. You guys fish in Florida, pitching it back in those thick bulrushes and cattails, it can get way back up in there. And also, guys, I will use a 5/8 ounce jig if it's really windy out. Let's say, for example, it's fishing and the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour. I may go to a 5/8 ounce jig around some of the sparse cover, like docks and stumps, in a 20-mile-an-hour wind, because my line's gonna have a bow in it, and by flipping that heavier jig into those sparse covers, it's gonna allow me to actually get that bait where I want it, and it gets it down to the bottom. So factors like wind, factors like current, factors like the density and how heavy the cover you have, you know, all determines the size of jig. But you really need all three. You really need a 3/8, 1/2 ounce, and a 5/8 to match all different conditions. So that's just a general rule of thumb. That's sort of the foundation that I go by it. Another thing that you'll find out about jigs a little bit is, in general, you want to use a heavier jig the clearer the water is. And the more dirty the water is, I go to a lighter jig. So if I'm fishing dirty water, like where that water visibility is like 4 to 6 inches in visibility, a lot of times I'll go to the 3/8. It gives that fish a little bit more time to find that bait. And if I'm fishing a clear water lake, like 4 to 6 foot of visibility, I usually always go to the 1/2 ounce size because I want that bait to get to the bottom as quick as it can, because that's how those fish are gonna feed on that jig. They're gonna feed on it off the bottom. They're not gonna come up on that jig as it's falling down through that clear water. So cleaner the water, heavier, you know, dirtier the water, lighter. The hotter the water sometimes, heavier the jig, and the colder the water, the lighter the jig. But ultimately, you have to let the bass tell you what they want. Just try and experiment with the different sizes until you figure out what they really key in on. And the best way to do that, let's say that you're fishing a 3/8 ounce jig and you're doing pretty good on it, you're getting some bites on it, try upsizing to a heavier jig once you know they're biting the jig, because sometimes if you go to a heavier jig or a lighter jig, it can increase the size of your fish at times. So hope it helps you guys out. We'll talk later.